Okay, so again, apologies everybody for the delay in getting started. My name is Carolyn Ray, and I'm the CEO and publisher of JourneyWoman. And I'm obviously not a technical genius, or I would have been able to figure this out today. But I want to thank you for joining. I want to thank you for hanging in with us as we try to figure out what's wrong. And please do put your questions in the chat as you've been doing already, and we'll do our best to answer them. For those of you that might be new to JourneyWoman, we are one of the world's first women's travel magazines and communities, established in 1994 by Evelyn Hannon, who was highly regarded as one of the first female solo travelers.
Yeah.
I took over JourneyWoman about 7 months ago with the express desire of Evelyn and her family. And our ethos is to really embrace curiosity as your compass and to seek, learn, and teach. So this is, this is what we're doing today with Linda is learning something new. And obviously, even though we can't travel in this time, it is an opportune time to be thinking about it and strengthen both our mind and our intellect and our curiosity. This is one of a series of sessions that we've been doing over the last 8 weeks, and all of them have been through the generous time of the people in our community, including folks like Linda, who are in our women's travel directory and offer female-friendly trips and tours, such as Linda does to Kenya. So I am going to, in the interest of time, just get right into our session. And we do have some photographs to show you as well, so hopefully that part will work. And then we can take any of your questions. So Linda, as many of you know, is the founder of Global Heart Journeys and leads a women's trip to Kenya. So Jambo.
Jumbo.
She's an award-winning documentary filmmaker, global champion for women, and has worked in Kenya for 20 years, and I believe the last 5 years doing the women's trip to Kenya journeys as well, where she gives people really an exclusive look into what's happening in Kenya and takes you right into the villages and all kinds of amazing places to meet women's communities and organizations and others. In fact, her trip has been called the trip that should be on every woman's bucket list, I believe, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your first trip to Kenya, Linda, 20 years ago, and why you love it so much and what really appeals to you about Kenya. And I'm going to put you on spotlight for a minute while I just do a quick post on Facebook.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
I've got my Siri on all these technologies. Well, anyway, I want to just say, Caroline, that what you're doing by bringing us together during this time is really, really important. So thank you for expanding the vision of JourneyWoman. And also, I want to just say hello to all of my friends out there. Even though you can see me, I can't see you, but I've seen some of you come in. A lot of you have already traveled with me to Kenya on one of our women's journeys to Kenya over the last number of years. And for new friends, I just say welcome. This is a perfect time for us to, I would say, to really be a global community of women. I think there's a lot that we all have to learn from one another across borders. Now, to go to answering your question real quickly, Caroline, is, yeah, it was about 20 years ago. And actually, it was during a pandemic. It was during the AIDS pandemic. I was a classical pianist up until my mid-40s, and I got this really kind of, I think we've all been through it in our lives, this sort of, is this all there is? And what am I looking for next? Feeling. And I decided to step back. I took a trip to Africa to sort of put things in perspective. Never had been there. And I met an incredible social activist. Her name is Mercy Chidi Baidu. And make a long story short, we became steadfast friends. I was taken by her in her wonderful African woman spirituality and the way she was in the world and her vision for helping children. And we launched, well, she did most of the work, but I helped her launch a children's welfare operation that now reaches, I don't know, 11, 12,000 children. And so over the last 20 years, she was my first global friendship that I had, and I could see how warm and inviting and beautiful this woman was. And it kept me going. And so the last 20 years, I've been going to Kenya. I think I've counted it up to about 25 times now. And met all kinds of women, have done all kinds of work with women from Nobel Peace Prize nominee to these visionaries like Mercy who have done major work on the ground, and then all of the women and children that they serve. So that's how my journey started. And let me just stop there and you can go to your next question.
So how do you think Kenya's changed over the years when you...
Yeah, it's an interesting question that you should say that. And it's more, I think, I can talk about Kenya changing. Of course, everything has become much more westernized. I think each trip that I take, I'm noticing, you know, at first it was, I saw a few cell phones and then many cell phones. Kenya was one of the, actually was the first country to create mobilized or to create mobile banking. And so bit by bit, I saw it become more westernized. Now, the thing about Kenya and all African countries is that underneath all that westernization, which started, you know, many years ago when all the countries were colonized, is there is underneath all of that, which is something really I hope that we can spend a lot of time talking about today. There's this deep underlying African spirituality, and specifically a women's African spirituality. And this is what is grounding all of the women in their decision-making, what sets them apart in terms of that sense of Ubuntu, that deep kind-heartedness, I am because you are because I am, where we're all interconnected. And so you never really lose that. And, you know, we can say that, for example, Kenya has modernized. And by that, I mean, when I first went there, there were rutted dirt roads. There were, you know, it was very, very difficult to move around. And now some of those roads are paved. But the bottom line is Kenya and Africa hopefully will never lose this deep, what I call African, it's the DNA inside their bodies, inside their minds and their hearts that really set them apart in terms of generosity, community, deep kind-heartedness. And that's what keeps me going back.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. I had the opportunity to go there about 2 years ago, and
Tell me about that.
I'm just going to come back on, actually. Let me.
Yeah, because I know you had an experience.
I had an amazing experience in Kenya. I went as part of a service trip, and I took my daughter when she was I guess she was 18 or almost 18. We went with a group of people into the Masai Mara, and we spent a week visiting schools and hospitals and farms and small villages. And I think one of the most, you know, I learned many things from that trip, but one of the most amazing was just how joyous and friendly people were. And I wasn't really prepared for that, I guess. But the kindness, the generosity, the gratitude, every time we would go to a school, all of the children would run out and sing and dance and grab our hands and pull us in. And it was so, we would sit there and say, this would never happen in North America. If you went to a school, the kids wouldn't treat you that way, but they would literally just grab us and pull us in, and
Exactly.
it was just a lovely experience.
Yeah. And I think as Westerners, as Western women in particular, I think, and I hope that that's what we can touch upon, the differences between what I would call our Western perspective and what we long for in our heart, which is this sense of interconnectedness, which is what they've got, and they just live that way.
Yeah.
And the thing I love, because I am a musician, what I love about it is that music and the rhythm of life is just interconnected. So, the moment you pop out of the womb, you are surrounded by joy, by music, by celebration. In fact, and I want to give this good friend of mine some credit. Her name is Tema Clay. She lives in, she's worked at Harvard. She's a Kenyan woman that lives in Boston. Just really knows her country incredibly well. And so she's really advised me over the years. And she said, the difference between the West and the Kenyan culture when you come into the world is that we come in with kind of a Western view that the baby needs to be, I don't know if we all do this now, but the baby is somewhat, not flawed, but carries the tradition of sin from previous generations, and therefore baptism wipes that away. And in the traditional African spirituality, a baby comes in as a holy being and is welcomed by the entire extended family and community and is celebrated. And I think the children feel that. They really have a sense of deep belonging. There's no question as to where they belong. So where we might kind of be drifting along and going, now where do I actually belong? What groups, whatever? There's no question. You belong to your people from that native tribe or ethnic group. I guess they also want to, it's tribe or ethnic group. So yeah, it's a beautiful feeling. And of course, women, we love that.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me a bit about the connection. You and I have talked about the connection of people with nature, and what that's like, and the connection to the sky, and land. And
do you have any of the photos that I sent to you? Are they?
Should I risk it all and try and put them up?
Let's go ahead. Why don't you put up some? Okay, here we go. I hope we don't disappear. Why don't you put up some of the photos that I put up for the village women?
Sure, just 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Is that working?
Yeah, it is. Now go back to some of the women, because I've got the tree. Okay, we've got there. Yeah, well, that's good. Now, can you go to some of the women in the village? Keep going, 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 going. There we go. All right. If this does, let's go back to the previous one. All right, let's just stay there for a moment. If that does not exude joy, I don't know what does. Let me tell you who these women are. They live in one of the most remote valleys, and I know them well, they know me. Years ago, my husband and I actually helped a Kenyan woman start, a Kenyan woman whose name is Lucy Mukaria. She's a legislator and the school's champion. And these women are the mothers of the children of the school. And we started a food lunch program to keep the school open, because kids won't go to school if they don't have food in their bellies. Well, this was just one of many photos. Now, these women, when they wake up in the morning, they are in a remote valley. So you would say, oh my gosh, they're the poorest of the poor, because they have no running water or no electricity. And that's how we always start, right? As Westerners, we start with that platform. But as you can see, they are loving their life, and they're loving the sisterhood between one another. So where does that come from? And this is my own theory. It's that when you wake up in the morning and you are in the village and you hear the sounds of nature and you are out there planting your crops by hand. I don't want to make this too much of a fantasy here, because life is also very difficult. But the fact is, they love their life. And so when I took this picture, I want to just segue real quickly to something. This valley now is, because of COVID-19, And because the school is closed and there's no hot lunch, they are under huge duress. In fact, I would say on the brink of starvation because the kids aren't getting the meal, their crops failed last year, so they have a lot of burden. However, last week, my husband and I sent some emergency relief funds to them to make sure that they could, and also a friend of ours that we know down in Sarasota. We sent some emergency relief funds to them to just keep them going for a little bit. And what did they say back to us? But we are worried about you. We hope that you are well. We hope that COVID-19 did not come and make you ill. So I know they're just joyful, generous-hearted. They're amazing women, and I love being near them. Carolyn, could you move to the next photo? We've lost our.
I'm back. Do you want to show another one?
Yeah, let's go to another photo of one of the other village women. This is my friend Lucy Mukaria, who I'm working with to help this school with their lunch program, which is now shut down. Let's keep going. I want to stop on this one. This is a sweet, sweet photo. This is a village woman. Her name is Mary. She is the mother, and I think she's 94 now. She is the mother of a very good friend of mine, Esther and Babu. Mary is charming beyond charming, and I know a lot of you who are on the call right now met Mary when we went out into the tea fields. And I want to share a sweet thing that Mary said one day. This is so indigenous. This is so real in terms of the sense of humor these women have. Her daughter wanted, I guess, if I've got the story right, her daughter wanted her to go to the doctor for a checkup. And Mary turned to her and said, "What are they going to do? Give me a pill for old age?" So there's this saltiness, this humor. This woman, and plus the other village woman that I've been in relationship with for many years, they still know how to use plants for medicinal healing. So what we do on our time with her on the trip is we sit in a women's circle, and then they go and they pick the different plants, and they said, this is how you use aloe vera. This is how you use oregano. And then it's for all kinds of medicinal purposes. So these women are still using that. Now, one thing I want to mention about medicinal healing, there are traditional healers and medicine women still practicing in Kenya. And in fact, I've heard there's one healer for every 250 people in Kenya. Now, compare that to there is one doctor for every 70,000 people in Kenya. So still to this day, the Africans have kept this alive, the Kenyans have kept this alive, but they do it very quietly. You will never be able to go to a traditional healer today and say, how did you relieve the arthritis of my old auntie? Because it's a well-kept secret. And they also know from having been colonized that they're not about to give away those secrets because they will be scoffed at, laughed at, or discounted. And when the British came, when the British came and colonized before Kenya gained its independence in, I think it's 1963, all of that traditional knowledge went underground because they didn't want it to be abused. Why should they tell the Westerners what they know? And what I say is, this is the time in with the space that we're in right now with COVID-19, we absolutely need to be going to these women and finding out what they know.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Let's go to another screen and I'll be a little bit less verbose. Just take a look at this photo. Every once in a while you get lucky and take a photo that happens. When the women sing and dance, they do it in community. and they do it frequently. When we were in the village with this particular group, it's called the, I'm stopping. Thank you, Sharon, for your little verbose encouragement. This woman is the leader of her women's group. Every women's group has their own songs, their own lyrics, and they appoint a leader, and this woman was leading her group. As you can tell, she is totally present. And what are they doing? They sing in either Swahili or their native tongue. So everybody in Kenya speaks Swahili. All education is in English. But this particular woman now is singing in her native tongue. And as you can see, the women kind of around her in the background, they all know these songs. They all know exactly what to sing for what occasion. Now, their songs can be really funny. They can be a little, I would say they have sexual innuendo. And they have no problem teaching lessons through their songs. So for example, they might be singing at this point, there's a lazy woman. We know where she is. She hasn't joined the group to do her work. And who does she think is going to help her when it's her time in need? So they really do strong, they in the sisterhood and the singing and dancing, they send strong messages to one another. Let's go to one more. Okay, now we're in a different community of women. So when I say the village women, I'm talking about those who are farming with their own hands. It's still 80% agricultural in Kenya, and a majority of those are the village women doing, hand farming on very small plots of land, which, by the way, they do not own typically. This woman, however, is a Samburu woman. The Samburus live in northern Kenya, and they live in this beautiful landscape called the high desert. These women are nomadic. Their main asset is livestock. And so when we go to visit them, they have a completely, well, it still is linked in that African spirituality, but they have a completely different context in which they live and raise their families. For example, they pick a beautiful dry vista, a landscape. And in that landscape, it's actually, there isn't much vegetation. But what do these women do? They come with their gorgeous jewelry, their vibrant congas, this ornate exotic jewelry that they wear, indicating if they're married, what their status of life is. And they're living off of their livestock. They live also off of drinking a combination of warm, fresh blood and milk. What they do is every day they take an arrow and they puncture sort of an extended artery in the cattle's neck. And from there, the blood flows, and they combine that beautiful protein with milk, with the mother's milk, and they give that to their little babies. These women are tough. They're fun, they're funny. And I've been visiting them and working with them for, I would say, the last 15 years. And as you can tell, all motherhood moments are universal. So here's this baby playing with their mother. And by the way, the term used for this community is they are called the butterfly women. And why are they called that? It's because of the way that their necklaces just kind of float in the wind when they dance. I will also tell you the reason I love these women is that they do not shy away from eroticism, from their bodies, from showing their bodies. During courtship with the young men, when they're young women, they go topless and they're proud of their breasts. They paint them with ochre, a natural ochre. It's part of the ceremony. And they just love looking beautiful. So they have managed to keep their traditional life intact, preserve their traditions, and I would say they have really rebelled against being modernized.
Mm. There are some beautiful photos here. If I could just, like this one, for example. Is that showing up?
Yes, yes. Now we're back to the village, and this little boy is an orphan. Whoops, oh, this one? Okay. Okay, so this is a gorgeous way to see their jewelry. Let me just say something. The woman to the left with the star on her forehead, that is a symbol for marriage. And her name, you know, all Kenyans have two names. Their family name, the name which represents the clan or the tribe that they come from. And by the way, babies are named first with their indigenous name. And then when they're baptized, like a few months later, that's when they're given their Christian name. Now, let's talk about Chrissy. That's her name, the lady to the left. Chrissy is got an attitude, and she is strong, and she is confident, and she is very married. And she is married to, well, she is part of a polygamous marriage. Polygamy is still very accepted in this tribe. And Chrissy, as you see her necklace and all the different layers, that represents status. So she comes probably from a man who has a lot of livestock and holds status within the community. Underneath that red part closer to her neck, girls are beaded at a very young age. So it can be anywhere from 9 or 10 or, you know, up to their early teens. An older man will designate that girl to be his wife. And when she comes of age, basically he belongs to her. So Chrissy is sort of the leader again of her group. But I just love this photo. It just shows you the kindness and the joy that permeates from them.
Yeah, it's a stunning, stunning photo. Beautiful.
Yeah. Let's try another one. Let's do another couple, and then I would love to hear about your time in Kenya and what it did for you.
Well, let me see if I can find a quick photo. So just carrying along the theme of beading. Are you able to see this photo? There's kind of two images together. Yeah. So this is at a women's empowerment center that I visited, where we were taught beading, and where I learned to make my own bracelet, and spent some time with some of the mamas from different areas. And of course, this is important to them because it lets them bring in another source of revenue into the family for those that can. And in the picture on the left is my daughter Alex, who I spoke of earlier, and to my right is my very close friend Andrea, who came with her husband on this trip as well. So so this was a lovely experience, and I think, I'm not sure how many photos I have, but this is when we visited a school.
Oh, lovely.
And the girls put on a dance for us, which was just amazing, with singing and music. And then this is my daughter interacting with some of the students at the school, and I think she was quite amazed how much they had in common. And even though, you know, you're in completely different parts of the world, there's so many things that that teenage girls have in common. So I think they even talked about Justin Bieber, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, okay, fun. Now I understand, Carolyn, I understand when we talked to get ready for all of this, that it really did change your daughter. Can you share that? I thought that was really fascinating. That one trip really changed her.
Well, it's interesting. I just wrote an article about it that I put on our website last night. I took her to Kenya because I thought it would have an impact on some of her decisions. And I know she's on the call now and they have some comments on this, but she was just going into first year university and into a media and culture course, and she chose, I thought, very relevant courses in global development and women's studies, and continues to amaze me with her her global perspective and her desire to want to do something for other women. So I think she made some good choices. The other thing that happened to us is when she went to university, I decided to put my house up for sale, and it hadn't sold when we came back from Kenya, but it sold a few weeks later. And I had 6 weeks to move out, and I had lived in this house for about 17 years and had accumulated a lot of things over my lifetime, over 30 years of adulthood, I guess. And so I made a decision to sell everything I owned, and so we auctioned off all of our furniture, all of our everything, pretty much everything we owned. We donated all of our clothing. We took all our formal wear down to a group here in Toronto that gives prom dresses away. And so we really tried to rid ourselves of every possible material possession, and partly influenced by that trip, because I realized that we just had too much, and I wanted to live a simpler life. I wanted to be kind of unbound by material possessions, and I had carried these things for so long that they just felt like an incredible burden to me to have all of this stuff, and to have just returned from a place like Kenya where people have little but they're so joyous and happy. So yeah, that all kind of led into this decision. So now all I have is a few family heirlooms and some photographs, and
yeah, that's incredible.
And that's it. And
yeah.
And I live in a rented apartment now, and I'm ready to travel whenever we
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's been fascinating because I've taken enough women to Kenya with me on our trip. And I mean, they can speak for themselves. Obviously, we have it set up here so that it's just you and I, but we always start with our first experience. It's like the shedding of, it's sort of a shedding of the first skin of what's keeping us closed in. And the first experience is, oh my gosh, why are they so joyful and they have so little? And then you have to just ask yourself, why do we even say that? And of course, it's the natural response because, we've been so programmed about the having. What I think is also fascinating is the lessons from Kenya on this great Mother's Day, and this very unique Mother's Day, which we will never forget, is really, I feel like I'm dropping down more into the African spirit, whereby, okay, I need to let go. There are no guarantees. This is kind of survival mode for a lot of people. There's a lot of angst. Okay, I don't have to go on and on, but this is how the African women have lived most of their lives, moment to moment, being resourceful. What do they have? They weave their social fabric together by sisterhood, by staying together and helping each other. And here's the great part, whatever little they have, they make sure to share that. And so what comes from that is a sense of you're not alone, it's togetherness, it's Ubuntu, and they do it in very real ways. For example, when a baby is born, and this is a throwback, and I know maybe some of you are already still doing this, but when a baby is born there's a huge celebration, or there's a celebrating of the birth, and the women all come together, they cook and they take care and make sure that the woman has enough time to heal. When there's a funeral, we attended a funeral a number of years ago, and it was my first experience of watching what happens, which is they last forever, but you have a certain number that is the core group, the extended family and friends, and then the entire village shows up. And you're expected to feed them, and that's that. And so it's just, again, I keep going back to this, and this is what I feel like I'm going to just kind of do a little plug here for JourneyWoman. This is what you're helping us to do. And it's, again, the coming together in unusual times and figuring it out as women to women. Could I just mention a couple of things, and then I think we can go to one more photo, and I know we're probably pressing up against the end of the hour for questions. Could you pull up, there is a photo in there of 2 women, and they're looking straight into the camera, and they're kind of leaning on one another. If you could pull that one up.
Let me see if I have that one, Linda.
Okay, all right.
I have the one with you.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
2 women. Yeah, I don't think I have that one.
Okay, all right, okay, that's fine. Here's, I guess, what I would like to share with everybody about the reason that I personally keep going back there over and over and over. And if any of my Kenyan friends are on the call or are going to hear this recording, I really want you to hear this. There is something intangible that I feel like I had lost by just pressing it to prove myself in this Western culture as a woman, that I am competent, I am capable, and I need to stay looking good. And every time I would go back to Kenya, is all of that, I could sort of relax that and let it go. And what would come up from the bottom is a sense that my just being is good enough. That the whole idea of accomplishing and having to have, I could actually let go of that. And so if there's anything that we can learn right now from the Kenyan women, it's the sense that life is holy, that the elderly are held in highest regard. I even had a waiter come up to me one time and say, I think it was Shosha, I can't think of the name now, for grandmother. And I was a little bit insulted because I didn't want to be thought of as old. And then he looked at me, he was shocked that I would kind of take that the wrong way. And he said, no, no, no. I am telling you, you are at the highest rung of the ladder in terms of reverence and respect because you are an older woman. And I just absorbed that and thought, oh my gosh, do we need that? So I got to tell you, if we could travel, we should all go to Kenya, and we should all learn these lessons and then come back and do our lives again.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. What do you think we can do in this time to support Kenya, or, you know, thinking about the future? I know you've yours on hold now until February, I believe, but what can we do now to be of support?
Well, it's a very interesting question you're asking. When I first went to Kenya, I know that I am a privileged woman, and I went there, and I'm not saying that I consciously brought that into my experience of meeting all the Kenyans, but I'm sure it was there somewhere. And so I remember going during the AIDS pandemic and seeing it ravage sub-Saharan Africa and coming back almost glad that I had a safe landing, and what can I do for them? And every trip that I went, that urge to do for them kept eroding. And I would keep going, I want what they have. I want that quality of living that they've got that, quite frankly, I can't find in my own culture. So now, during COVID-19, I think the thing is reversed. They do not have as many cases. I mean, they're able to contain it, even though they're still in lockdown. they're wishing us well because they know now the playing field has been somewhat leveled. However, here's the difference. Because of any culture that's in the developing world, its structure is so much more tenuous and fragile. For example, the village women get up in the morning and they go and they do their farming, or they go and they buy the food, or they go to the women's marketplace. Well, all of that now is locked down. The community structure is locked down. They don't go to church like that. I mean, these are community people. They have to go to church every Sunday. And so I think what we can do right now is find those initiatives, because I was on the call this morning with an organization where I'm a trustee. And I was saying, what is happening on the ground? And they said they are on the brink of mass starvation. If this thing goes on another month or two, that the village people especially are not going to be able to get the food. They can't grow it. They're not in harvest season. Number two, they don't have access to manual labor because the jobs are gone. And they don't have any charities coming in. So that's one thing. So find those groups that are servicing that kind of hunger relief. I know I'm going to launch a crowdfunder probably by the end of next week for that one valley where the school is. That's one thing. But that's what I would say is needed most.
Yeah. It's such an interesting time. And here we are with kind of our, tribute to these people on Mother's Day, and talking about all the wonderful things that we can learn as mothers and bring home here. Have you seen people from your trips kind of bring home the lessons in different ways, or what's your experience with the women?
Always. Yeah, always. Mary, you are on the call, I believe. I'm going to use my friend Mary as an example because I know she has a tough skin and she won't care. I don't think she had ever been to Africa before. And when she came back, I remember she was looking at maybe doing a water project, or she wasn't exactly sure what to do. But I think she translated into going back to India with an organization called Days for Girls. And these are sanitary napkins for girls who don't have access to disposable napkins. And so there's just one case of, Mary, tell me if I'm wrong, but you can't respond. So this is one case where it was a woman who had gone to Africa, and she was so motivated that she decided to start stepping into more global travel and international relief work for girls. There are so many things that my travelers have done after coming back from the trip. Our last group that just traveled with us in February before everything shut down. It's almost like we got out of there just as COVID-19 struck in February. They have done fundraising for a street kit project because these little boys were now going to be locked into place, and so we needed to get their provisions to them, so they did that. So there's all kinds of things. Now, again, I want to really be clear, though. Women's Journey to Kenya is not about fundraising. All these initiatives are outside of the tour. So I want to make that really clear. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if anyone's got some questions that Linda can answer in the few minutes that we have left. I think we're getting close to 1 o'clock, and I'm losing my voice, I think.
Sorry.
No problem at all. It's been lovely hearing these stories and seeing your photographs. They're just stunning. And I know that you're beloved by this group who's called in today. All of our Lindas.
I don't know if you have a question. Do you have a question?
Nope, if you want to say something in closing, that would be great.
Yeah, I really do. I want to just, this comes from the words of my good friend, Tema Ekle. And every time I read this, it just sort of warms my heart. And again, I think on this particular Mother's Day, we have to remember that the spirituality and our deep sense of knowing that we're connected really is still there no matter what happens. Okay. We do have a question here. Diane Wolfson. Did you see the question?
Yeah, if you want to finish, and then we'll take it.
I just wanted to read this real quickly. Because nature is so absolutely, core to the lives of these women. Listen to the sacredness in which Atema has described how her tribe, I don't know exactly where she's from, but how her tribe and her group of people manage working with nature. For example, the Samburu women that I talked to you about before, they don't want to grow crops. They don't want to disrupt the earth. They don't want to take more than they need. So they do this, raising of livestock. But listen to what Atema has to say. We talk to our crops and our crops talk to us. We talk to our cows. We sit under a tree for shade and we pray for rain. When we pick herbs, we pray that they possess the same healing energy they held for our ancestors. People don't slaughter an animal just to eat meat. They may do so because it's the dry season and there are a few crops, but before slaughtering animals, they will first pray over them. The animal is seen as being in service to us and its life should be honored. Remember, these creatures will nourish and become part of our bodies. So that is, I wish we could get, I know this is the indigenous spirituality of people all over the world, but my experience is in Kenya. So I find that lovely.
It is lovely. Thank you. As you say, Diane had a question. What extent do tribal differences have, or to what extent do tribal differences have an impact on the women's relationships to each other?
To each other. I have not experienced that among the women. I have definitely seen it in the patriarchy and politics. So that is a big, huge deal because in Kenya, the politics is governed by who is the strongest tribe. And then that person, that man who gets into power, typically favors that particular tribe. Now, but I have never seen the differences among the women. They really know how to work together. They're incredible.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And most families, Linda, would, in terms of being polygamous, how many children would be in a family, or how many wives would there be in a typical house?
Okay, so I think polygamy is definitely on its way out. But from what I understand, about 10% of all marriages, or 10% of the population, are still in polygamous marriages. Now, again, remember that
yes, polygamy, yep.
It's mostly Christians, so Christianity forbids that. But again, at the traditional level, at the village level, underneath that, polygamy is accepted. And as you mentioned when we were talking, getting ready for this, the wives in a polygamous marriage very much get along together, and they really know how to be co-wives. And it's really incredible because we would think that that wouldn't be the case at all. Now, polygamy has been translated into modern times in this way. There's a wife in the city and there's a wife in the country. And there's a mistress in the city or a mistress in the country, but it's been translated from actual polygamy and having multiple women to this more broad concept of having a mistress. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
let's end on a high note, which is let's just talk about one little lesson from motherhood. So what would your Mother's Day wish be for the women here that are listening today?
That I would like to step into what I've learned from the Kenyan women. Number one, life is what it is, and that we have very little control over the cycles of life, and that we should lean into it and not be afraid. That feeling of, survival, like, oh my gosh, am I going to make it to the next day, is common to the Kenyan women. And and I have seen that they really know how to navigate it because they live in the present moment. They appreciate this meal right here, right now. They are glad for their safety right here, right now. So it's a huge lesson in the quality of how to live, because really all we've got is that moment, our present moment. I would say the other thing is share whatever we have with those who are in greater need. I mean, this is like from, Bibles, this is from Sunday school. This is from, we all learned this in kindergarten. But it's really a time right now to reach out and do that little thing and make a difference in another person's life. And I think for us as women trying to keep hope, I would say, I've seen my Kenyan friends weather the AIDS pandemic. Life after life was lost. It was devastating. The social fabric of their culture was actually ripped apart. And over time, they have reconstructed it and rebuilt it. And it's the women that did it. So let us not forget, we do not want to look to those who are ripping us apart or tearing us apart or are always blaming. Let's go back to what we know and create. That's the thing that's saving me. I know it saves the Kenyan women, so let's do that.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. If you want something done, ask a woman, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, listen, this has been lovely. Thank you so much, Linda. And thank you to all of you for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it. We hope you have a lovely Mother's Day. And just a quick reminder, if you have time and can sign up for our JourneyWoman newsletter, we'll have some more information on this, and we'll also share a link for anyone who wasn't able to watch this on Facebook. So so we'll be able to see it again we're going to do a watch party on Facebook again, and we're going to also post this on YouTube. So thank you all, and have
much love, everyone. Be really good to yourself, and just whatever you need to do to nurture yourself on Mother's Day. So love you all. Mwah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.